You are standing at a border crossing. A guard looks at a small booklet in your hand. He waves you through, or he does not. A few steps of dirt separate one country from another. Nothing about the ground changed. Only the idea did. For 290,000 years, that idea did not exist. No countries, no borders, no booklets, just land, and people moving across it. So how did 8 billion people end up sorted into 193 nations? The answer does not start with kings or armies. It starts with a limit inside your own skull. For most of human history, you did not live in a country. You lived in a family. Bands of 20 to 50 people, moving with the food, owing nothing to a patch of ground. You knew everyone. You knew who they trusted, who they avoided, who owed them a favor. In 1992, Robin Dunbar, an evolutionary psychologist at Oxford, proposed that the human brain can only manage around 150 stable relationships. Below that number, gossip and reputation hold a group together. Above it, the whole system breaks down. Every country on Earth blows past that number. India holds 1.4 billion people. Even Vatican City, the smallest state, holds around 800. None of them can run on personal trust alone. The country, in a sense, is humanity's workaround for a brain that was never built to govern strangers. But that workaround took thousands of years to build, and it began with something surprisingly small. People stopped moving. Around 12,500 BC in the Levant, a culture called the Natufians settled into permanent villages. Circular stone houses, grinding tools, formal cemeteries, and here is the strange part. They had not invented farming yet. They settled down first. Archaeologist Colin Renfrew argued that the megalithic tombs built across Neolithic Europe worked as territorial markers. Bury your dead in the ground, and the ground stops being just dirt. It becomes identity. The first borders were not fences. They were graves. But graves alone could not bind strangers together. For that, you needed something people who had never met could share. You needed belief. In southeastern Turkey, archaeologist Klaus Schmidt uncovered Göbekli Tepe, a site of massive carved stone pillars dated to roughly 9,500 BC. The people who built it were not farmers. They had no permanent settlement. They gathered from scattered hunting bands to build something sacred together. Schmidt's conclusion reshaped the timeline of civilization. The temple came before the city. Shared belief let strangers cooperate at a scale personal relationships never could. At Göbekli Tepe, that belief was carved into limestone. Today it is printed on a passport. Belief could gather people, but it could not yet build a state. For that, humanity needed grain. Around 10,000 BC, wheat and barley were domesticated in the Fertile Crescent. Political scientist James Scott, in his book Against the Grain, made an argument most people never consider. States did not form around yams or root crops. They formed around grain, because grain ripens all at once, stands visibly in a field, and can be measured and taxed. A yam hidden underground cannot be counted from a distance. Wheat can. The state, in Scott's telling, began as a taxation machine. And a taxation machine needs walls. Around 8,000 BC, the settlement of Jericho built a stone wall over 3 meters high with an attached tower and an internal staircase. Archaeologist Kathleen Kenyon called it the world's oldest fortification. Others have argued it guarded against floods or simply kept a labor force from leaving. Whatever its purpose, building it took thousands of coordinated workdays. That is not a family project. That is administration. Administration, once it exists, creates something new. Inequality. Whoever controlled the granary controlled the food. And whoever controlled the food gained power that no leveling gossip could undo. That power eventually built cities. Around 3,500 BC, the Mesopotamian settlement of Uruk grew to house tens of thousands of people. A population Dunbar's number could never hold together through personal relationships alone. So the people of Uruk invented something to replace it: writing. The earliest written tablets were not poetry or prayer. More than 85% of them were administrative records, grain rations, worker lists, livestock accounts. The first written word was likely a number beside a picture of barley. The country was built, in part, on paperwork. With writing came formal borders. Around 2500 BC, the city-states of Lagash and Umma fought over a strip of farmland. A king arbitrated the dispute and had the border carved into stone. It is one of the oldest recorded political boundaries on Earth. Two governments arguing over a line. It has not changed much, but a line between two cities is still not quite a country. For that, you need the idea that strangers inside that line belong together. Anthropologist Robert Carnero offered one explanation in 1970. In places where fertile land is boxed in by desert or mountains, the losers of a war have nowhere to flee. They get absorbed instead. Village swallows village. Eventually, a state forms, less by design than by geography, leaving no other option. The legal and emotional architecture came far later. In 1648, the Peace of Westphalia ended decades of European war and established a new legal idea. A state holds absolute authority within its own borders. That principle still shapes nearly every international boundary today. But laws alone do not make you feel connected to strangers you will never meet. Historian Benedict Anderson called nations imagined communities, held together not by kinship, but by a shared sense of belonging manufactured largely through print. When books and newspapers began circulating in everyday language, millions of strangers could read the same words and feel, somehow, like the same people. Sociologist Ernest Gellner put it more bluntly. Nationalism does not wake up nations that were already there. It invents them. When Italy unified in 1861, only a small fraction of its population actually spoke Standard Italian. As one statesman is said to have remarked, Italy had been made. Now Italians had to be made too. Sometimes the lines came from people who had never even visited the land they were dividing. In 1916, two diplomats drew borders across the collapsing Ottoman Empire with almost no regard for the people living there. In 1884, European powers gathered in Berlin and divided an entire continent without inviting a single African ruler to the table. Most of those colonial borders still stand today. So how did humans invent countries? Layer by layer. Settling down tied identity to land. Grain created surplus worth taxing. Walls protected that surplus. Writing and bureaucracy managed populations too large for any single brain to track. War absorbed the losers into the winners, especially where geography left no escape. Sovereignty gave that absorption a legal shape, and nationalism gave it an emotional one, convincing strangers they were somehow the same kind of people. Was any of this inevitable, given agriculture, surplus, and a brain wired for groups of 150? Something like a country was probably always coming. The flags, the names, the exact shapes on the map, those were accidents of war and geography. The concept itself was not. French philosopher Ernest Renan said a nation's existence is a daily vote. It survives only because people choose every day to act as though it is real. It is held together by memory, and just as much by forgetting the violence that built its borders in the first place. Tonight you will go home to a country. You probably will not think about it. But that country is younger than pottery, younger than the wheel, younger than farming itself. For 98% of human history, it simply did not exist. It exists now only because, thousands of years ago, someone grew a field of wheat. Someone counted the harvest. Someone built a wall around it. And someone convinced the people inside that wall that they belonged to each other. A country is a story enough people believed for long enough that it became real. And every morning, without ever being asked, you wake up and believe it too.